Hi, my name is Wendy Rouse, and I'm a professor in history at San Jose State University. I taught high school history for over 10 years. I taught U.S. history and government, and now I work with future teachers in the social science teacher preparation program at San Jose State. And we are working on ways to include LGBTQ plus history in our curriculum, and so I wanted to share with you today a few examples of how we've gone about doing that. And hopefully this is something that you can use and apply in your own classroom. In a typical U.S. history course, you might spend several days or even weeks on the Progressive Era, and this is an excellent opportunity to discuss shifting gender roles as well as queer relationships like Boston marriages. A Boston marriage was a term coined in the late 19th and early 20th centuries to describe a pairing between two women who formed a long-term, committed relationship with one another. Boston marriages were often simultaneously friendships, professional partnerships, creative collaborations, and lesbian romances. Now, you no doubt have noticed that when you're teaching the Progressive Era, there was a large number of unmarried women who were active in the progressive reform movements. The traditional narrative teaches that these women chose not to marry in order to enjoy the freedom to pursue an education and a career. Now, this was no doubt the case, especially for many women at the time who didn't have any options any other way but to not marry in order to allow them to pursue these dreams. But it was also often the case that people would choose not to marry because they just simply were not heterosexual. So our modern terms, again, lesbian, bisexual, pansexual, asexual, or queer, did not exist at the time. So it was not possible for them to declare those identities for themselves. However, it was possible for them to choose not to marry. Society called them spinsters, but they could choose to move in with another single woman. So as you can imagine, this was a common domestic arrangement for queer women in the past. Take, for example, the story of progressive reformer Jane Addams and Mary Rose Smith. Addams was the founder of Chicago's Hull House, and Smith was an active club woman and a philanthropist. They lived, they traveled, they co-owned a summer home together, and their letters to each other reveal a deeply intimate and personal relationship. In her May 26, 1902 letter, notice how Addams calls Rose Smith my dearest. And look at this line. Please give my love to the Lady Eleanor, and you must know, dear, how I long for you all the time, and especially during the last 3 weeks. There is reason in the habit of married folk keeping together. Forever yours. So letters like this one are really helpful to use and incorporate into your lessons, especially with the Progressive Era, to understand the relationships that developed among these progressive reformers. Another example comes from Mary Woolley and Jeanette Marks. They were a Progressive Era couple who lived in a Boston marriage together. They met at Wellesley College, and they became close friends, and their letters reveal a deep love for each other as well. Take a look at this one from July 9th, 1900. I have put my life into your hands, dearest, for the great overpowering love of which I had never dreamed before has come to me, and nothing can ever separate us, my other and better self. Darling, you must realize that I am with you, that my love is about you, that I am thinking of you, that I love you as no one else in the world can love you, that you are my love, the sweetest woman in the world. I told you well that I felt always like lavishing my love upon you. I do now, even on cold, unsympathetic paper. I feel that I cannot say again and again what you have heard so often, what you know so well. It comforts me at this evening hour when my longing for you is so great. And a final example of a Boston marriage that you could also incorporate into your Progressive Era unit comes from California, and it actually comes from my own research on Progressive Era women and Boston marriages. Gail Laughlin was an attorney, and Dr. Mary Sperry was a physician, and they were both reformers and suffragists who lived together in a Boston marriage for over 15 years. Laughlin was an organizer for the women's suffrage movement in the state and for the national suffrage campaign. Dr. Sperry worked to provide medical care to women and children. So when Dr. Sperry died suddenly in the influenza epidemic of 1919, we have an opportunity through her will to see the love and devotion that they had for each other. So Sperry not only passed on all of her property to Laughlin, but she also passed on her ashes, her bodily remains. Much to the shock of her family, Sperry insisted that everything go to Laughlin, and this, of course, upset them. But Laughlin held on to her partner's property and her partner's ashes, and was obviously devastated by the loss of her partner. So when she passed away in 1952, so this is decades later, She requested in her will that the two of them be buried together, side by side, with their names etched on a single headstone. And that's what this photo is here. So you can see how intense these relationships were between these women, and Boston marriages obviously provided a number of advantages. Economically, two women could save money by living together. Professionally, they could encourage, inspire, and collaborate with each other on a number of reform efforts. And personally, they could provide emotional support, friendship, and romantic love for each other. These were therefore powerful personal relationships and professional alliances, and that's why I like to call them progressive power couples. One of the ways that I teach the history of Boston marriages and progressive reformers is through an activity known as a networking party. So each individual in class is assigned the biography of a specific progressive reformer. They then study that biography, and they assume the role of the individual they have learned about. Students rotate around the room, they chat with each other, they introduce themselves as if they are the person that they have been assigned, and they share about their life and they share about their accomplishments. This is a fun and engaging activity that allows students to learn about a large number of progressive reformers in a very short period of time, including many of the progressive couples in Boston marriages.